Good morning, noon, evening or night, depending when you're watching this video. My name is Alegende and welcome back to World of Tanks and the Look Back series. And today we are looking back at the Personall Campaign. So around a year ago I completed all the mission for the first set of the Personall Campaign, giving me the final reward, the Object 260. Now I don't have the 279E, nor have I actually achieved all of the missions by myself. I did use around 8 or 9 obligations in order to autocomplete the final 2 missions, the MT-15 and TD-15 for the Object 260, which I would have loved to feature in a World of Tanks Greatest of Games episode or a spin-off episode, which I already did with the SPG-15 and the LT-15 and the Heavy Tank. Now, Heavy Tank 15 I did convert into a Greatest of Games. But those missions just weren't happening anywhere close for me, especially TD-15, which I would have only achieved once in my shit barn on my damage record of 8006. That's only 6 damage over the requirements pretty much. So that's a 1 out of a near 25,000 battles probability, which actually can even increase, that I can actually achieve this mission. I'm just not a high damage dealer, more of a kill stealer, if you know what I mean, wink wink. And don't get me even started on the missions with honors, because hot dang man, it's just So in the end I haven't fully completed the Personall Campaign, nor am I willing to do that. But completing something as a whole was never really a requirement to be featured at a look back at episode. However, I do miss the final incentive to complete everything, so I don't know all of the experience it can give. With all of that out of the way, let's take a look back at the Personall Campaign. So first, let's talk about the general difficulty of the missions. And in my personal experience there were 3 categories of difficulty. Category 1 contains the easy missions. These are the ones from the Stug 4, T28 HTC and the Excalibur. These missions, especially the ones of the Excalibur, are easy enough to just start and see when you make it. At some point you will get a game where you are going to achieve those missions, and if not only, then you want to watch out for particular conditions of those missions in order to make sure you achieve them. Then there's the second category, the medium missions, which coincidentally are the ones of the medium tanks, the T-55A and the Chimera. These missions are a noticeable upgrade, and some of them are even hard enough that if you don't play a certain way with certain tanks, you will have very little chance of making it. Because all of these missions will be judged on a single excellent game, and if you are like me, more consistent than occasional sublime, you will struggle with that. You trying to work around and find strategies which increase your chances are much more necessary. You have a ram mission? Try to be more aggressive and ram more shit. You need spotting? Try to find out some of the best positions and recognize how much power you have once the enemy light tank is destroyed. More blocking damage? Play more heavies, etc, etc. And if that doesn't work, then use obligations. But I suggest you save them for the final category. Category 3, the hard missions, the ones of the Object 260 and 279E. I would even say that the 279E missions are even on a harder level, since you need to have consistent excellent games. Even if you can reset them and makes the odds quite in your favor, these missions are hard. You will even meet some missions who aren't the final ones that are almost impossible to achieve if you don't play a certain way. For me that was definitely Heavy Tank Mission 12, where you need to block 3 times the amount of HP, but you also need to do 3000 damage. With that missions there were moments that I do over 3000 damage, but in those scenarios I barely got shotted at, since I'm in a relatively safe position, but with high block damage, being more in an aggressive position, but doing less damage since I can't overexpose myself. And then there were the mission 15s. So like I said before, MT15 and TD15 had to be achieved by obligations for me. With the MT15 you need to do 3,500 damage to enemy TDs. Was never going to happen against camping TDs I needed to rush. Maybe in grand battles, but it's hard to go in with enough HP of the TDs left without getting destroyed. And if you are targeting them one by one or taking the time and recognizing when you can push the flank, there ain't enough damage left. TD15 is 8,000 damage. In my whole WoT career of nearly 25,000 games, I achieved a 8,000 plus game once in my shit barn with 8,006 damage. Like I said, I'm not a damage dealer. It's literally a 1 out of 25,000 or a 0.004% chance on achieving this mission for me personally. I also want to talk about the obligations and how great of a mechanic those are within the personal campaign. So obligations are basically free pass points you can earn by achieving mission 15s with honor. So you can get 4 or 5 per campaign part. With one obligation you can render a regular mission 1 to 14 for completed without honors, and with 4 obligations you can render a final mission 15 for completed without honors. This allows you, when you complete some of the easier mission 15s with honors and skip the harder missions of the Object 260 and 279E later on. Struggle with heavy tanks? Just complete some other missions with honors and in the other tank types and you can still get it. Issues with a certain nation? Play other nation better to compensate. It allows players to decide or intensively calculate, like me, which missions you might skip and how many obligations you need for it. For example, I had 4 obligations locked behind TD15 of the T55A, but with the obligations left I didn't have enough to complete all of the missions of the Object 260. Well, I could complete the missions by default, but like I said before, certain missions really doesn't fit my playstyle, so it would be almost impossible to achieve them. So my best chance, I calculated my best chances were to redo TD15 of the T55A with honors, because that would give my 4 obligations back, in which I could progress further again on the Object 260 missions. So great mechanic, and I used it to almost full capacity. So the great mechanic of the obligations compensated a bit of a flaw within the campaigns, and those were certain missions, especially blocking missions, in which your only goal is to block damage. Now you can see how this with the special shell meta is quite difficult these days, and with that it really butchers the general goal of a random team to win the battle. Because the best chance of achieving those harder block missions is to pick something like the mouse. Don't help your team and actually make them lose and let the enemy swarm you and hope they bounce enough shells on your armor for you to achieve your blocking mission. I myself didn't really do that. There was a game that I achieved Heavy Tank Mission 15 for the Object 260. In that game I was in my mouse on Berlin and had exactly those circumstances, but I didn't purposefully play more passive so the enemies could take the advantage. However, I definitely see people try it in order to get it, so it's better to balance those missions out so they don't hinder the general team effort that much. Another issue with certain missions are the artillery missions. So it was said in some polls conducted by some community contributors that most people play arty in order to achieve those missions. Now, we all know how skillful arty is and such, so those missions were really a pain in the ass, and also not really well balanced because arty got nerfed again, and I still think the missions are like 2 nerfs behind, so they're actually now harder, so people are now trying even harder to complete them inside their artillery. In the second campaign it's even worse, where you have certain nations that you, are pretty much locked behind. So, for example, in the coalition there was a mission for stunning damage. You need to have a French artillery, no other choice. If you don't have a French artillery, you cannot achieve that mission. It's such a narrow-minded setting for a mission. Sure, you have your obligations, but most missions still contain some choices you can make. At least in the first campaign you can pick any artillery or any tank type, and for most of the second campaign you can pick either that nation, the bloc nation of the alliance nations. You still have some choice. With it's getting too specific with that kind of mission already behind a certain nation parameter. So those kinds of missions where you really can only play with one certain tank line is, it's just a bit sad and not necessary. Unless you have all the tanks, then you wouldn't really mind. But I had to buy back my tier 5 French arty. I still played it until tier 5. So at tier 6 I thought, you already get the top gun, so let's try it with that, and achieved it like that. And it shouldn't be like that. You still be forced to play a certain tank line. You still need to have choices at least, because then they can say you don't have these and these tanks, so at least pick one of them. But now it's you must pick this specific one, and just no. Not good. That is some really badly written content. So the last thing I want to talk about are the rewards, and if you want to earn some credits, these are some great missions to get it. At least 1 million credits per phase, alongside other types and goodies that get better for each phase, ranging from consumables to even premium days. So if you are short on credits and you still have a lot of those missions to achieve, try to focus on them a little bit more. But how about the most important rewards, the tanks? So starting off with the first campaign, you get the Stug 4 as the first tank. This is the only tank I found it so unremarkable to keep that I actually sold it. Afterwards it would still be nice to have it as some kind of a collector's vehicle, but the regular Stug 3 is in my opinion a far better tank with the same playstyle, exactly the same playstyle. This cannot be said about the next tank, the T28 HTC. A T28 at tier 7 with some notable but easy to hide weak spots. This is a great tank to peek corners with your gun at maximum traverse range to hide those side weak spots. This is quite a unique looking vehicle with also a bit of a unique playstyle at tier 7, so I would definitely keep this. The T55A does resemble the T54 a lot, and if you do have the T54 you don't miss a lot in terms of playstyle and statistics. The T55A has only better gun handling and terrain resistance, but it's a good tier 9 tank, and I want to play more than the T54 because it doesn't require its own crew, and Even though it's German, I also have some other nice German mediums I really enjoy. So to have a Soviet hybrid shuffled between them allows me to train the same crew in different tanks with vastly different playstyles. So again, especially if you want to train your German medium crew and you have multiple German mediums, I really recommend to keeping this tank. The Object 260 is more balanced than people might think. It's competitive, sure, but it's definitely not broken. It has decent speed and quite a good gun, but at least its armor doesn't work for me somehow. But it's considered stronger than the 277. Well, I think my experiences are just too different from the norm for this one. But the 260 is definitely a keeper. I mean, a tier 10 reward tank, don't have to say more. Then the second Personall campaign, you start off with the Excalibur, aka the Stephen Hawking tank, a case of not that remarkable but unique looking. As a tank itself, I found its playstyle quite nicely as a tank destroyer, so for that I keep it, even though I would keep it only for those sexy looks. The Chimera, the highest alpha damage on a tier 8 medium. Absolutely perfect, case closed, nothing to say more. Again, unique looks with unique stats and also plays quite nice. Then the Object 279E, the only one that I don't have and probably will never get. We all know how this thing is. There are countless videos on how OP this tank is, and I'm fully agreeing with all those claims. I would rather see this tank back to its original form, where the underside was overmatchable by gun calibers of 121 and higher. With that nerf back to its original form, it would still have great armor against lower tier or even same tier tanks who don't fire gold and don't know about the exact points on the upper front plate where you can pen. So please nerf it back. And also nerf the chieftain while you're at it. So that has pretty much been it, what I want to say about those Personall missions. It is a great addition for the game. Some long-term missions which already existed for like 5-6 years maybe even. So it's also great that they also have expanded it with a second campaign. And there might be word around that a third campaign might be arriving soon. But I talk about that a little bit more in my first video of 2022. And with that, it's the end of this video. Hope you enjoyed it. And I will see you next time. Laters!